Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Show podcast. In today's episode, we welcome Peter De Bruyn, a seasoned restaurateur with over 30 years of experience. Peter has led kitchens in full-service restaurants and hotels, including his role as executive chef at the Strathcona Hotel. Peter also chairs the board at the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association, or the BCRFA. Peter, welcome back to the show, man. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Gordon and Jose. I'm actually working with Camosun College now as the
Oh,
food and beverage manager here. So
fantastic.
excited to be here, but I'm speaking to you on behalf of the BC RFA and the Restaurant Association here,
That's well, right.
BCRFA.
Well, you better watch your whatever you say then when you're representing such a fine organization as that. And also,
Appreciate that.
congratulations on the new position. Hence the Camosun College T-shirt there, or
There we go.
the top that you're wearing, Peter. It's been a while. I think the last time you were on the show was November of 2023. I'm sure a lot has changed for you, the new position. Before we dive into some topics, the hot topics that we've laid out for the show, we're going to talk about tipping culture. We're going to talk about the new California minimum wage hike. But before we jump into those, Peter, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your journey throughout hospitality over the years?
Yeah, well, I'm a alumni from Camosun College and Camosun College Hospitality, as well as Culinary Arts. I've got a Red Seal in culinary, as well as a Bachelor of Commerce from Royal Roads in entrepreneurial management. Um, I've been an executive chef for many different organizations. I've worked with the Strathcona Hotel, Milestones Restaurant, the Oak Bay Marine Group, recently last year, and now Camosun College in this capacity.
That's fantastic. Are you on the interurban campus? You must be then. Hey.
Interurban campus. That's right. So this is where the cook training culinary arts program is located at the Helmut Huber Center, right in the center of the campus, where people can enjoy student-made food and other offerings.
I think they've done a great job with the interurban campus. I mean, it's not new anymore, although it's kind of new to us Victoria people. But I really love the Pisces facility, and everything they've really done out at interurban is really been top notch. I was there for a couple of years. Oh God, I'm dating myself, but no, back in 2010-ish, around then. But I really like the campus out in interurban. How do you like working on that campus?
Well, it's a beautifully kept grounds and buildings. There's a couple new buildings. Pisces is quite nice, of course. The health building. I don't want to date myself then to tell you when I was an alumni here because I was started with 19, so quite a while before that. It was a nice campus then. It's still beautiful now for sure. I say it's interesting coming back after so many years after being a student. So I don't think I've gotten over it every day yet, but
A little bit of
it's good
a
to be
little
here.
bit of a yeah, a little bit of generational shock. Peter, I'm gonna put you on the spot here a little bit. You've been around for a long time. You've been an executive chef for a long time. What's the one thing that you noticed that has changed in the restaurant industry? What's the one overarching like big shift that you've noticed over the years?
The landscape's changed quite a bit. Uh, Goalposts on how to maximize profitability over your department. Labor has changed dramatically over the years. The amount of people available to work, it's changed. There's been a lot of people looking for work, then very few for so many years. I feel like it's turned the corner again now. The other challenges are food, food supply, the cost of goods has not only gone up, but become more challenging to find, more challenging to source. A lot of different factors. Locally made food, of course, is desired, might not always be accessible in consistent formats. So operators have to adapt quite often to use local products, better products for the most part, and things we want to do, but it's more challenging to purchase. There's so many options and so many supply chain issues as well.
Hmm.
Product shortages, product changes, where they come from. Perhaps the product is spoiled when you get it. These are all challenges facing us. So, labor that's more expensive, maybe people that didn't show up to work, food that shows up spoiled, um, less consumers because prices have gone up. I think this is a day-to-day reality for majority of restaurants.
So if I'm reading what you're saying right here, everything has changed immensely. Um, sticking with labor though, let's talk about the minimum wage increase that happened in California back in April. How has this wage increase in California and BC, for a matter of fact, the province of British Columbia has raised the minimum wage as well. How has this impacted restaurant costs, and what strategies are restaurant owners considering to manage these rising expenses?
The California wage increase up to $20 was a 20% leap since 2019, I believe. Um, Classically, what happens with a labor minimum wage increase is you increase your selling prices. That's the the short of it. If it goes up, we need to increase our selling price to make sure that we still maintain our margin. It's not that easy anymore because when the wages go up to that degree, that's not the only thing going up. You have a compounding effect with cost of goods, compounding effect with uh, property taxes, and various other expenses that you might be incurring. So by simply just doing a menu price increase, you could price yourself out of the market. It's also a competitive market. So it's a real finite exercise to figure out how much more you can charge. So you determine how much of a hit you're going to take on your profitability because you can't close the doors. You still need to be accessible for consumers. So that what ends up happening, that 4.3% profitability, that's a nationwide average, starts to drop. So is it okay to, break even? You can only manage that for so long. You'll still need to upgrade infrastructure at some point, buy new chairs, new stove, upgrade some marketing, do some things, so you can't break even. You need a few percent just to keep going. So this is the implications of those kind of wage increases. So here in BC, we've seen $17.40 as the wage. So then you think, okay, well, that's not necessarily a lot of money for, to have a family and support yourself, because a two-bedroom apartment could be over $3,000. So how does that work? You can't be paying that. You need to pay more. Well, for the most part, restaurants pay more, and especially in the back of house, front of house. Um, so, but what that does is that wage increase forces everybody's wages up, and as a business owner, you're stuck with that. So you can't raise the prices too much. So then you need to cut labor and find efficiencies in labor. So say you have 180 man hours in a week, sorry, 180 worker hours, then you need to go down to 160. So the problem then is, do the workers get enough hours? So sure, that wage has gone up, and maybe an 8 hour day now becomes a 7 hour day. So is that working for the workers as well? So it's a puzzle. There's no answer. That's the reality.
Mhm.
Um, the key is finding those efficiencies.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and it's in a business by business case as well. Are there any sort of, I know pricing is probably one of the first things that operators are looking at, and from our perspective, that's a big reason why we developed Dine Pricing was that we were trying to loosen the belt for the average operator because they're almost neglecting their pricing and only really adjusting it on a yearly or semi-yearly basis. Even quarterly, we feel is not enough for restaurant operators to look at their pricing and their pricing strategy. Is pricing and other types of technology, is that a reasonable approach for operators to look at to solve these issues with the minimum wage hike?
For sure. Classically, it might have been twice a year a price went up.
Hmm.
Spring, maybe a little bit more, fall, a little less, but you still do an increase. Now it has to happen more often
Hmm.
because the amount of changes in the cost of goods have changed so dramatically. Some tactics can actually be removing a menu item and putting a new one on. So you're not just increasing that beef burger from X amount, up $1 or up 50 cents or whatever makes sense for your business. I'm not, maybe a beef burger is not a good example, but say you have more different menu items that change more frequently, you remove those and then you put a market price. You price that accordingly to what it should be, and you're not actually portraying a price increase to a customer. This is just a new item, and this was the selling price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's changing more often, and you don't need to necessarily change the entire menu. You could change select items. So this, you might do that, those key cornerstone items that bring in all of your, majority of your revenue more carefully and strategically, but those other ones could be changed at other times throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. What about the discrepancy between grocery store prices and restaurant prices? Because that has changed immensely over the years as well, especially since the pandemic. What's your take on that?
So if menu prices have gone up, I think that the average is about 4%, or sorry, 4 times inflation, not 4%, 4 times inflation. So we can see that at the grocery store as we buy our groceries. We're all consumers at a grocery store at some point. So if we look at that kind of price increase at a grocery store, then we look at a restaurant. For us to increase our prices from a restaurant 4 times inflation, so maybe we're at 8%, again, prices us out of the market. And the perception generally is, well, you can buy grocery store food, restaurant. If the price goes up that dramatically, it's not affordable to eat out, because we also have, a restaurant has all those other expenses, infrastructure, servers, property taxes, and whatnot. So the correlation is broken. It becomes more challenging in a competitive marketplace. At the end of the day, with a more competitive marketplace, the innovation goes up. So the concept is, of course, that food is, more interesting than you can make at home. So you will go eat out. It will be more expensive, but you might go out and dine less. When you do, you could splurge a little bit more. The splurging or a higher average guest check, or when operations are positive, it's more positive because people are splurging. When it's less positive, nobody's going out because you're going to the grocery store, watching your pocketbook, and perhaps not going out to eat if you're bringing your kids to soccer practice or whatever. You're going to buy that, sandwich at the grocery store to make sure it's more affordable.
I don't even want to buy sandwiches at grocery stores. I'm a big sandwich guy, and sandwiches are like $8 for just a couple of pieces of bread and a little bit of meat. That's not even affordable. Anyway,
Right.
I digress. Jose?
No, I think that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, hey, Peter, I forgot to say hi.
You know what? I
And
talk a lot, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm
yeah,
drowning
no,
everybody
that
else.
that is true. That's true. But I just thank you for the insights. Creativity being a key element to actually play with with pricing and not compromising the experience. I mean, it just brings to mind elasticity as a powerful to measure and understand, because if a restaurant has something that is so precious and everybody loves it so much, it technically should be able to handle a change of price that the consumer will be willing to pay, instead of taking it out of the menu, right?
For sure.
And like you say, with changes being so, like, it is chaotic almost, with so much changes in prices and so many other conditions. I wonder if there's any kind of technology that could help with that.
I wonder.
Peter knows what podcast he's on. Come on now. Let's stop it. We're biased here. We're biased.
Take it away, Gord.
I think you were doing.
Oh, is it okay?
See, Peter,
Okay.
this is why we record,
I
because we screw up all the time.
Yeah,
That's
well,
right.
I didn't. I was following,
Can
but
you please pay attention? It's your question.
fair enough. So, Peter, change of topic here, but not because it's related to salary somehow, or income of the staff. Can you explain the concept of tipping fatigue and how it is affecting both consumers and restaurant operations?
So tipping fatigue is the fact that consumers are tired of paying high gratuities, possibly for a service that is deemed just standard service. So perhaps you get you get food and beverage, and it's simply expected that you tip that 18 to 20%. The fatigue is, you know what, we're not going to go to eat because we don't want to pay 20% more on on our dinners, or if that's the expectation. At the same time, there's people that love to tip, and they will tip for good service, which is great. And it leads back to the initial concept for tipping is to tip for good product and service. So if you're going to get good product and good service, I don't think we can argue that a gratuity is positive. I think the fatigue comes in when it's expected and the service is not given. So that's the controversial part of that, if I could say. This leads into, should we tip? Should we not tip? Tipping within the restaurants are challenging because you have how do you manage it? How do you manage the money that's coming in? And maybe I'll leave that for the next question. But that's where the fatigue comes in, and it doesn't always exist in other cultures throughout the world. So from North America, if we travel abroad and we go to a place where there's no tip, we almost can't imagine, oh my God, the burger's $20. I'm going to pay $20 and that's it.
Interesting because, the other day I went to a liquor store and this is another aspect that it's quite interesting. I grabbed my stuff myself. I carry it all the way to the cashier. The person that is there is charging, doing that transaction with me. And then I get requests for a tip. And it's what? It is outrageous that I did all the work. Why are you putting it there? And they're in front, right? This is a classic. They're in front, and you're like, "Oh, can you look away?" And I remember just saying that, I hope you're getting paid well because this service, I carried. I did it most of it myself. I thank you for the smile, but I'm not gonna get tipped. And I just was wondering what they're gonna say, and they were just like, "Oh no, that's understandable," but it's so uncomfortable anyway.
I think this is the underlying fatigue that we're all experiencing because 8 years ago, probably more like 8 years ago, those prompts weren't coming up on at your checkout with your credit card or your debit or your debit card, right? The fact of the matter is that these people who are working at retail locations or at a coffee shop, they're just not getting paid enough. And so they're relying on these extra gratuities. And in North America, I'm tired of it. Jose's tired of it. I'm sure Peter is tired of it. This is the fatigue that we're all experiencing. And so something needs to change. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, so it's the assumption then in those places that the people aren't getting paid enough. So what happens if they are getting paid enough and the gratuity is just an extra bonus, right? So that leads into, where are we getting no tipping policies, living wages and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting because for me in the conversation with this person, it was inevitable. The owner was the common enemy. And I'm showing compassion and all of that, but it was at the same time like, come on. So talking about this no tipping policy, what are the pros and cons of implementing a no tipping policy in restaurants, and how might this affect both front of house and back of house staff?
So no tipping has been experimented with right across North America. So the concept is to offer that living wage, adjust menu prices, suggest to people there's no gratuity here. You're just paying the bill. And the front of house are getting paid a higher wage than they normally would be, seeing as most front of house are generally a minimum wage plus they make gratuities. So here you have to compensate for that. So it increases their wage structure. Back of house generally takes a little portion of gratuities. It all depends. Each place is different. So I'm not going to get into specific percentages because there's so many policies out there, but generally tips are divided amongst all the members of the staff working. So it's probably it's an experiment. It works because you're not dealing with gratuities. You're doing it for the consumer, so they don't need to tip. It makes the income for those workers more stable. You can go to the bank and say, here, this is my wage. This is how much I make. Unequivocally, you can ask for, loans, car, whatever, whatever you need to, because it is your wage. It's not your wage, but you're not going to declare your tips because you think that's sort of extra.
That makes a lot of
it
sense.
it defines the roles too. I mean, as far as say going to school for service for cooking, it might not be understood, but you're doing a red seal in culinary. That's you're going to school for 3 years. You do some extra courses. You have a bachelor of commerce equivalent. Um, by the time you're a professional in the back of house, you could have equivalent of a master's degree in education. And so does that warrant that kind of, wage? It's interesting. That could be in the rest of the world. Same with the front of house. You do hospitality management. Um, you learn how to be a server, you learn wine, you learn everything. It's a craft. It's a profession. It's a profession to be proud of. And you learn that so you make a living wage or the proper wage, let me say, for that. It actually, whether it's correct or wrong as an owner, then you know what your labor is, you can plan your menu pricing around that. And you don't have to factor in, say, gratuities to
Right, right.
people's compensation.
Yeah, and I mean, technically, there's the thought also that if you have a powerful culture of service, front of house should be able to increase the average check, and
That's right.
right, and that if and back of house quality of the product would also include that and the extra little things. It's an art and a business, and I think or like Jason Brooks, our uh, our regular guest would say, you got to build it as a powerful culture, and start thinking a little bit corporate, so that you learn new efficiencies, you build a culture that
That's right.
supports and makes it more effective, and as part of that, create a culture that of little GMs, so that everybody understands what everybody's trying to achieve, and to as a collective, that horizon, that future that would benefit everyone.
Yeah,
If
that's
there's
right.
some legislation that can be put into place where, because when I go into a full service restaurant, it's about experience, and the person who's serving us, and from the plating of the ingredients, and the ambiance and all that kind of stuff. If I have a really immaculate, wonderful experience, I want a tip. And I'm not saying get rid of tipping in a full service restaurant, but anything outside of that, where someone isn't giving me some type of personal service. Like Jose, you were saying you did all the work. You went and picked up the bottle. I mean, it's a lot of work. Okay. But like, you brought it up to the counter and then you're paying for it. Like, I wonder if we can legislate tipping out of those experiences, those like retail or the self-serve style consumer experience, where they are doing all of the work. And I wonder if there's some type of legislation or something, some solution that can be put into place where it protects the restaurants, because tipping is ingrained in our North American culture. It's going to be really, really difficult to move towards a European style of tipping. But can we, like, slowly but surely remove those tipping prompts from, a retail scenario? I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
And before you answer, Peter, to that, I just want to say, Gordon, I think that's a great idea, because what is not being factored for sure is that experience of mine, which is not the only a liquor store, there's many places that are very similar,
Yeah.
is that even if I didn't pay tip, it adds to the fatigue, which impacts the restaurants.
You're still saying no to them. You're saying, nope, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want to give you extra.
Yeah.
We have to be careful what we ask for legislation for, because that's more, regulatory bodies, more inspections, more bylaws, more checking of, who's going to audit those activities. Do we want another, audit of practice? Whereas organic industry trends may dictate that as we move forward. I mean, much like, if that experience you're suggesting, Jose, and they see a decrease in traffic, perhaps they remove that and then they see an increase in traffic. It's an interesting exercise anyway, right? So the other side of the coin with tipping is, no imposed percentages, and on food service or whatever. And it's back to the basics of, this is going to be good service here. Maybe it's good service at your barber shop, your liquor store, where they have a tasting and they give you a sample and they package it up. Maybe that does deserve a gratuity. And that's how they make their money, uh, with gratuities, because they're actually doing what the initial intent was to give that good service or that good food.
I do agree. I do agree. Like you bring up a really good point about adding, more regulation to business, and that's the last thing, especially food and bev needs, is more regulation. I get that. My stance though is at a liquor store. Let's use the liquor store for example. Yep, they do have tastings. Yeah, and especially in the BC liquor stores, right? They do have really good service there. My dad worked for the liquor board for 25 years, and so I know their operations really really well. And so they do have really good customer service, but at no point were they ever getting tips. So that wasn't a part of the culture before. And so if they go above and beyond and show you a nice bottle of wine and give you some pairings with it and all that kind of stuff, that's just good business to get someone to
Yeah,
come back
for
more
sure.
often. Now, if we're talking about your salon or getting a haircut or going to the barber, I think yes, but they're doing a personal service for you. That's what they're doing. They're spending their time, they're making it, they're curating it, they're doing a really good job
Mhm.
or not. Then yeah, I think tipping makes a lot of sense in those personal service businesses where restaurants fall into that category. What
Yeah.
what I'm saying is let's electronically, remove the tipping option from
Yeah.
the payment process, right? That's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm just an idea guy. I don't have all the solutions. So
And Gordon, that's where the fatigue comes in,
yeah,
is that, oh, we're getting prompted again for 20%, where you might be thinking, hey, I'm going to be generous and going to tip, you know, maybe it's a dollar figure, $5, $10, but then your prompt is say 25% and you get discouraged. And then now you don't even want to think about it. So fatigue sets in to your brain on this kind of gratuity.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Sticking with tipping and on a more local, well, more Canadian level. Peter, how are restaurants managing tips in light of the recent CRA regulations and WorkSafe monitoring? I mean, what methods do you find are being the most effective thus far?
Well, we're still hitting all the key points here, aren't we, Gordon? And gratuities. So CRA looks at tips two ways: controlled and uncontrolled tips. Control means they go through payroll and the employer needs to pay CPP, and it goes under the paycheck, so it's reported that way. Uncontrolled need to be paid out promptly, and there's several apps which don't come to mind right now, that an employer can set up a private account they don't even have access to. You have a council of staff that monitor that, distribute it appropriately, and it goes into their everybody's individual bank accounts by the next day. So those funds don't actually even hit the business, and that's probably the easiest and best ways to handle gratuities. Large places that do large gratuities for banquets and so on, that'll just, again, that's so the amounts are so big, they'll generally go through payroll and whatnot. Recently, WorkSafe has gone to several places now, and this has been in Victoria. It's been discussed in depth, I believe, where they've gone to a business and looked at WorkSafe compliance, looked at revenue, and see that there's no gratuities reported on the revenue. So they add 18% onto the total revenue for that business and say you haven't paid enough WorkSafe premiums and find the difference. So that's where there's an issue, and the goalpost has changed without proper consultation to the industry. And I'd say if anybody is listening to this and they've heard this, I don't hesitate to reach out to BCRFA immediately, to Ian Tostenson. He is 100% been dealing with this and knows the insides and outs much better than I can articulate here, and we'll be working on this. Again, it's one of those things where if there's a goalpost, explain it, explain what the expectations are, explain how a business needs to comply, what's going to be audited, give time to adjust practices to ensure that you're in compliance, and then proceed. And I don't believe that has been given enough due course for restaurants and small businesses until now.
That's wild. 18% kind of out of nowhere, making the
So that
assumption.
actually, for sure, and that's the average, right? So if
Yeah.
tips have gone from 16, on an average of 16 to 20%, that's right in the middle. So it's widely known that, say, an 18% gratuity is now the normal, whereas maybe in the 90s we're talking 10% and somebody was generous at 12, 15 was unheard of.
Yeah.
So how has the evolution gone here? So now 18% is the expected.
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't I mean, this would be a whole other episode, but we haven't even talked about the impact of a cashless society compared to, let's say, down in the United States, cash is still very prevalent. And so, tipping with your card here is traceable, right? As opposed to tipping with cash. In terms of, the IRS or here in Canada, the CRA being able to audit and discover these transactions. That's a whole other bag of worms. We are out of time for this episode. Peter, now's your time to plug away. Where can people connect with you? What's your platform of choice?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I work at Camosun College, Culinary Arts. My phone number is 250-514-3614. I'm also restaurant consulting, Peter at DeBruynConsulting.com.
Speaking of plugs, this podcast is sponsored by Dine Pricing, real-time restaurant profitability. Dine Pricing uses artificial intelligence to improve restaurant profitability by dynamically updating menus across digital channels like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub. Again, that's all the time we have for this episode. Pete, thank you again for joining us. Until next week, say goodbye, Jose.
Tip in cash when you can, and goodbye, Jose.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter.
I appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thanks, guys.